Joining me this week is Sarah Neininger. She is the founder and executive director of Action in Africa. Sarah, how are you?
I'm awesome. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, it was so cool. You reached out to me on an email and I was like, wow, I love what she's doing. This is so new to me. I was learning about it through your email and the stuff that you had sent over and your guys' Instagram page. But I'm so curious. You started this when you were a sophomore in high school. Tell me how, why, what does that look like when it happens?
Yeah, I mean, I will preface this by saying this was never a part of the plan. So it's been a really wonderful organic journey over the last 18 years. But Action Africa started simply as just a school project with a group of other students. My high school history teacher had showed us a film about kids in Africa, and fast forward 18 years, here we are.
But out of all of the students, and you guys start this, so you kind of start this in high school, but you're 16, 17 years old at the time, and you're like, yeah, I should do something with this. Or does it pause? You start this in high school, it kind of pauses, and then you get to your adult life and kind of visit it again. What is the transition that happens there?
Yeah, it has been a part of my life since I was 15. So we started as a group of kids just raising money for already existing organizations, doing really interesting, different things throughout the continent. And one happened to be based in Uganda. So we had helped them build, I think then it was a widow shelter or a library or something. And my senior year, they invited us to Uganda to see the project we had helped fund. So that would have been 2008, and we are still working in that very community today. The more time we spent there and the more work that we were doing, the more clear we got about our mission and our purpose. And we've since transitioned from funding and supporting other organizations to building our own model of what we think is really impactful, important, meaningful work in a country like Uganda. But it's been many years of kind of refining our model and who we are and what we do. We're really proud that we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary of our current community center right now. So that's been an exciting year in celebration for us. And it's really setting the stage for what's to come. But it very much was a school project and raising money for other organizations, and learned so much through that process to build what we have today.
And you say this wasn't the plan. This was not a part of your what you envisioned your life looking like. So, what made that change? What about all of this in that video that you had in that class that changed the course of your forever?
Yeah. You know, I'll personally share I was a student athlete, but I was also a troublemaker and having the time of my life in high school. My parents were also going through a divorce, and my older brother has special needs. And I think at that pivotal moment in my life, I was looking for some purpose, and I was looking for something to really sink my teeth into and feel like I could have control over when the rest of the world and when you're a 15-year-old girl feels very chaotic. This felt like something I could kind of like wrap my hands around. And then that trip to Uganda was, as you can imagine, really life changing. When you can see and feel the impact that you're making and build it based off of community and building relationships. I mean, that really was when the rest became history, when we met the kids and the families and the schools and fell in love with the work that we were doing. So, being a teenager that was a little angsty, this gave me a tremendous amount of purpose and helped me kind of recalibrate my life, which was pretty important at that point in time.
I love to hear that. It's always cool to see that somebody's passion started from a place of personal. That's often the case, whether it be intentional or not. And it's cool that you found an outlet for things that were going on in your life that allowed you to do something to help others. You could have gone a lot of different routes. I've been
Yeah.
reminded of that by therapists when I talk about things. They say, "Well, you could have chose something different." And
Mm.
I don't know if you've ever heard that. Like based on what you just told me, that little excerpt about your life, you could have chose vastly different directions and different paths. What do you feel like kept you on this path to continue helping and then not just taking it from this school project and this school community that you created, but then to a full-blown position where you now have 30 plus employees? That is a drastic change and a huge shift in what your responsibilities and role looked like from this starting?
Yeah, I will preface this by saying you might feel the same way too, but I feel like I have the best job in the world and I work with the most thoughtful, hardworking individuals and we all really enjoy each other and we laugh a lot and that's just like the icing on the cake is that we get to actually make a difference every single day, and that we're having a little bit of fun while doing it. It's the dream. I could have never orchestrated this life myself, and a phrase that I love to share with people is when people are like, well, what's your plan? Or, when I was finishing college and deciding about going to grad school or moving to Uganda, I always just said my only plans are to be surprised. And I think that is the theme of my life. It's been nothing but one big surprise, but it doesn't mean that it's not a lot of work and that the days are long and hard and the circumstances with which we work in are oftentimes very devastating and heartbreaking. But I think what keeps me going and doing the work that I do for now 18 years, which is crazy, is the individual impact in the day-to-day stories that we see of lives being changed, from kids who have severe special needs who are now walking and in school every single day to moms that are able to put food on the table and educate their own children to our first group of kids that I met on that trip in 2008 who were in primary school are now graduates of our university scholarship program and three of them are working for us full time and like this is like the good stuff now. We're really seeing the fruits of our labor come to fruition. And that's really what keeps this thing going.
You mentioned the heartbreaking and the devastating parts of this. So much of nonprofit work, you are seeing things that a lot of people like to turn away from because it's uncomfortable, it's hard, it's sad. What are some things that maybe you've learned in this process of why you can continue putting yourself through this? And I ask this from a place of someone who constantly on a completely different nonprofit side is working with animals and it's always, well, how can you do that? I could never give them away. I could never foster. That's a constant theme in general with nonprofit is how do you do it and how do you deal with the sadness and the experiences that you're going through while you're witnessing honestly some of the harder parts of humanity. So maybe you can speak to that on just different levels. I don't know where it takes you, but I would just love your perspective on that.
I love that you asked that. I'll share on a personal level. Something that I've been doing recently is I have a folder on the desktop of my monitor that I call caffeine, and I have screenshots and pictures. And, when we got our first $1 million donation, I took a picture of it and put it in there. When we redid our board of directors, there's a screenshot of that in there. Or the first university student that we hired from our scholarship program sent me an email when he signed his contract. And, reminders of the good stuff as just like a daily dosage of caffeine to fight the good fight. I would like 10 out of 10 recommend for everyone. I look at it regularly. But yeah, I think it goes back to the individual stories again. And also, listen, I'm biased in the work that we do, but I think we're remarkably good at what we do. We spent a really long time refining our model, and then you see the impact of it. So, our entire team in Uganda, for example, is Ugandan and led by the community, and they're the representation of the work, and they're the ones that bring the proposed ideas of programs and projects and services, and then they deliver on them. So when I go to Uganda, which is a couple of times a year, I get to witness the great work that's happening on a day-to-day basis, despite sometimes the challenges. And I think you can probably imagine some of the challenges when it comes to a country like Uganda, where there's an immense amount of poverty and suffering, and for better or for worse, people experience temptation and make poor choices that can be so devastating on a personal level, but also an organizational level. And you just have to continue to kind of meet people where they're at and stay the course and fight the good fight. But there's been a number of moments where we probably should have just thrown in the towel and we would have had every reason to do so. And I'm so glad that we didn't. But there were some pretty painful chapters in our organization, but I will say, and I think in everyone's organization, by the way, but coming out the other side of it, we're so much better for those challenges and have learned how to pivot and how to be thinking outside the box and really just committed to the mission. But Yeah, there's probably a number of circumstances where we should not be here doing the work that we're doing now, but I'm so glad we are.
Well, and there's a reason you are. There's a reason that it happened the way that it was supposed to. And I'm a firm believer in that. Everything pans out in the way that it's supposed to happen, for better or for worse. And I love that you have a caffeine folder. I think that's a cool, like serotonin boost when you need it. Pick me up. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And I love that you mentioned this side of things of there were moments where you should have potentially thrown in the towel and you didn't. Is there misconceptions or things over the course of time that you've learned, that you've experienced? Maybe it's about the things that are happening in Africa. Maybe it's about nonprofits. But is there just things that you learned along the way where you wish people could also learn the things that you've learned?
Oh my gosh, Morgan, how much time do you have today?
You can walk me down any path you want to go here.
Oh my gosh, how to even approach that question? Um, I would like to think that for us at Action Accra, we like to do things differently and rather unconventionally. And sometimes that's unfamiliar and uncomfortable for people. So I've got a couple hills that I would like to die on as far as how I believe my belief systems around nonprofit work and international development. There's a lot of layers to being a white woman from Aspen, Colorado, working in a country like East Africa and making sure that we have representation of our work. And we talk a lot about what my role is in this organization, what it's not, and how do we make sure it's community led. And there's a lot of pressure around those narratives and conversations. And I find that sometimes I get very insecure about that or in my head about it. And then I'm kind of humbled and reminded that like I'm here to do the good work and we have impact to prove it and show it. So just not getting caught up in the noise of things. And I think with nonprofits, it's so easy to do that. You know, there's a lot of conversations around overhead and what you pay your employees and what your work looks like. And there's just a lot of noise. And so we try really hard as an organization to stick to what we believe in and do things unconventionally and a little bit differently. I am reminded by my team often to what extent and at what expense are we having these hills that we die on, and how can it be an opportunity for a conversation and a learning opportunity for people, but not at the expense of donations and the great work that we're doing. But I would say in this season of my leadership and this exciting chapter, I'm learning a lot about just how to speak my truth and how I feel about things and not wavering in that. And so a bit of, you know, going on podcasts and talking about our work is being a little bit vulnerable in who I am as the leader of this organization.
Okay, well, of course I'm now curious, and you took me a few different paths, and we will go down them all. But what are these hills that you will die on? Because I think it's a beautiful thing when people have their convictions, because when you have seen and experienced and been in a field long enough, you have the right to die on a hill. There's good in having the passion of certain things. So I see dying on a hill as a good thing. And that's why I would love to know more about the ones that are very, very close to your heart and what you're very passionate about in this work.
Ooh, fun. I love sticky stuff. Although my team is probably going to listen to this and be like, all right, well, you're never going on a podcast again.
Hey, but this is how we change the narrative, right? This is how we do things differently and how we rewrite stories and how we do better is sometimes talking about the hard stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I do think in the nonprofit industry and the work that I do in particular, there are great, meaningful conversations and shifts in narratives. And we love to see that. But to answer your question, I would say one of the most controversial things is the overhead and salaries of employees. And I can tell you two very specific examples. One of our major donors years ago, you know, I didn't take a salary for probably the first gosh, I want to say like 13 years of this. I had expenses covered and whatnot and made this possible, but I had a donor say that they were going to stop giving to us until we paid our employees a livable wage because they view their gifts to us as an investment. And if there's no return on this or guarantee that we're going to be around for years to come, they're just wasting their money. And that was pretty eye-opening and revolutionary for us as an organization and caused us to really think through our budget and our fundraising strategy and making sure that people can be compensated here. And I will say that really shifted how we then do our work in Uganda and being able to hire employees here in the United States to help with fundraising and creating some sort of financial stability for our work. It's allowed us to grow our programs in Uganda tenfold. So you see a direct correlation by an increase in our overhead by the great work and the longevity of our work and meaningful work in a place like Uganda. So being able to fairly compensate employees is definitely one of those hills that I want to die on. And I will say all of this with a caveat of within reason. We still have an obligation to make sure that we are good stewards of donor dollars. But that does not mean that we should not have the best of the best employees and be able to pay them a livable wage so that they can live a wonderful life, just like all of our friends who work in tech or entertainment or for-profit spaces.
No, it's so important. And I do, having worked with several nonprofits in my life, finances is such a tricky subject because nonprofits do, they get donor dollars and that's the purpose. But there is such a huge conversation around it, so much so that oftentimes I've said it myself where I can't work nonprofit. I can't have a living in nonprofit. Do I want to do it? Absolutely. I can't make a livable wage in there because most of them don't because they feel an
Yeah.
obligation to support the causes that they're going after. But I think there's such a huge loss in that because to your point, these programs that are already doing really good things could do even better things if they have people who don't feel so exhausted, so financially strained that they could spend their time and effort into really investing into something. So I think that's a great hill to die on. I agree with you. And that's coming from someone who's had not even in the side of nonprofit that you guys are in, but just in working with several different ones over the years. That's a common conversation. It's common controversial. And it's also really hard to watch when you see really good-hearted people doing incredible things, not able to care for themselves, not just emotionally and mentally because of what they're doing, but financially. And that is so, so
Yeah.
common.
Yeah. And I think the statistic is, and I actually have it screenshotted in my caffeine folder as a reminder. I think it's something along the lines of 93% of organizations don't make it to the 10-year mark or are less than $1 million. And to me, that's a direct correlation and indicator of being able to hire employees and sustain the work that you do. And by the way, this is a comparable conversation in Uganda too. I'm not just talking about US, but in really committing to our employees globally, we take great care and hire the best of the best in Uganda as well. And I'm biased in all of this, so take it with a grain of salt. But that's why you see us at a $2 million level organization and around for 18 years, and that's because we're investing in our people to do the good work and fight the good fight at a meaningful and long-term level.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, I like all your hills, but this is the one that we focused on in that moment. You also mentioned how it's being a white woman from the States and you're working in Africa with primarily a lot of the Black community. So, what has that experience been like?
Ugh, a learning experience. I'm viscerally aware of where I'm from, what my upbringing looked like, and I try to be cognizant of that in the work that I do, but also stick to my truth and that it's allowed me to do the work that I do and be of service to another community. It's funny, I have so much to learn and grow in this space. I'm the first to admit that, but I will also say from my experience, have observed this as a very strong Western conversation. And that does not mean that these themes are not deeply rooted in colonialistic roots. I acknowledge that. But these are not conversations that our team in Uganda are having, for example. And that to me is very eye-opening and interesting. And by the way, would carry a whole other weight if our leadership staff in Uganda were like, hey, you're the white girl. Like, what are you doing here? And there's none of that. I think they're tremendously grateful for my leadership and the resources I bring, irrelevant of where I'm from and what that looks like.
Mm.
So I think that's another perfect example of where I have an obligation and a duty to be educated about this, and I'm responsible to this narrative, but also I'm not to be distracted by it and let it deter me from just day to day doing some really good work.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really important lesson. And one that you wouldn't have gotten had you done a nonprofit that's just here. It's a different experience. I also imagine because Africa, a lot of those countries within it are considered third world. So you're experiencing also just a different overall experience in another country, different economic standards. You have a different level of culture. There's so many bases of which you are different. And I think those are some beautiful lessons that not a lot of people get to learn.
And I think I've had great grace and like time to learn some of these lessons and acknowledge like the ongoing learning in this, right? Like I started going to Uganda when I was a teenager and I go multiple times a year. I lived there full time for a little over 3 years. Like I'm like really putting in the work and really a part of the work that we do here. But I've had the opportunity to slowly learn those lessons, which has been helpful.
What was that experience like when you lived over there and you're seeing all of this and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we do this and how do we do it in the best way possible? What was that part like of this story?
So I, at that point, gosh, okay, so I was in college. So I was running Action Afra in high school and college, going back and forth during holidays. And when I graduated university, there was a moment of like, are we really doing this? And what does this look like? Like, it feels like we're kind of halfway in and halfway out, and decided to move to Uganda and like really figure this out and assess like, okay, we're gonna fully commit, or like we did a good thing and now this isn't working. And I'll tell you, my family had never really been out of the US. So this like Africa thing, my whole life since I was a kid was like, what is Sarah doing? Like, what is happening here? And so I would be going back and forth, and I graduated college and I got into grad school at USC to get my master's in social work. And my whole family was like, yes, she'll be stateside, she'll be home based, like we're recalibrating her life. I got in, I went to like orientation, dropped out, moved to Uganda. So it was a fun little plot twist for the family. But I was like, I'll go to Uganda and like really give this a noble attempt and see if this is going to be a thing. I'll go for 6 months. Naive me, like that's a bit of this like white girl thing. Like I keep thinking that I know how to fix things or that I've got a solution here, and thought I'd go for 6 months, hire our staff, make a plan, and then come home. And 3 years later, I was like, I'm still here. I need to make a plan. But I will say, to answer your question, those 3 years were some of the most magical years of my life. I think that right there is even something that makes us a little bit different. That as the founder and executive director, I went there and I fully bought in, and I lived in our community center, which was really fun, very chaotic. Soccer balls breaking glass into my bedroom window, and always hearing the kids start their PE classes at 6 o'clock in the morning in the front yard. But it was filled with so much joy and creativity and building and hiring. It was just a blast. But I think like really helped shape perspective and how we do things and what things look like here at Action Africa. I think it also carried so much weight for our team in Uganda, like really showed that I was bought in and that we were in this together. And like boots on the ground, not just like I'm on the US side, they're on the Uganda side, but the collaboration was so fun.
Oh, yeah. And that's just so hands-on and so important of a role when it does come to nonprofit that can make the difference between someone who's just a donor and somebody who's actually a volunteer. That's where the work is. So it's cool that you had that experience, and I love hearing that. I do want to hear a little bit more about your parents and how you mentioned that they were like, "What is she doing? What is happening?" Because I think it's incredible that you chose in most capacities of the sense that it's a more non-traditional way of living and, being done with college and be like, "Yeah, no, I'm gonna go here." So what were your parents like in that experience for you? And was that just hard for you as you were doing something that you were paving a new path?
So I will preface this by saying I have an older brother who has special needs. He was born with cerebral palsy, is very independent and very high functioning, but definitely has his own challenges. And I spent most of my childhood growing up going to physical therapy and speech therapy and all these different programs with and focused on him. And that really, that experience opened my eyes to other populations that are otherwise sometimes disenfranchised and have a different way of living and need different avenues of support. And I think that really set the foundation for my heart to do the work that I'm doing now. We've got a couple beloved kids in our special needs program that are kind of outside of our wheelhouse of work, but I'm like, I love them. And that I really attribute to my brother and growing up in that kind of household. But I think in having an older brother with special needs, it really forced me at a younger age to become independent and kind of march to my own drum and live my life in a different way. So while I think my parents were like, wow, Africa's really far, like, what are you doing? I also don't think they were entirely unsurprised by it. Um, I do think that for a number of years, everyone was kind of waiting for me to like outgrow this phase. And perhaps there's still a bit of them waiting for that. And I'm like, all right, well, maybe at the 20-year mark, you'll believe me that this is a thing. But I think like regardless of how unfamiliar it felt to them, I do know that they've just been so proud of this journey and have watched it grow from the ground up. And my dad has been to Uganda now twice with us, and my brother actually came in January. We did a big donor trip celebrating the 10-year anniversary of our current community center and breaking ground on a brand new campus that I'll tell you about later. But having my dad and brother there and seeing it and feeling it was just beyond special. And even the flip side of that, our staff and our kids have heard me talk about my brother for 15 years. And for them to meet him and receive him and love on him was just like, it gives me chills. And again, like I have the best job in the world. But for my dad, we had kids back when I was in high school that didn't understand the time difference. So they'd call at 3 o'clock in the morning, being like, where's Aunt Sarah? Where's Aunt Sarah? And my dad would be like, she's sleeping. Like, and for him to then connect the faces to those kids in Uganda as they're teenagers now, I think, many years later, they're really starting to get it and understand it, but now they too have experienced it.
Oh, I love that so much that your whole family has gotten to now see and witness the things that you created and have building all this time to especially your brother getting to go over there and witness that. I can only imagine that experience. You probably just wanted to bottle it up and be like, I'm going to keep this feeling forever in this moment and I'm just going to keep replaying it. That would be like 80 caffeine folders, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even know how to like contain that into my folder, but you're exactly right. Like there are no words to describe that.
Oh, that's so special. And I think it's so beautiful to look at your life. And it is when somebody often takes a different path, there's always questions, there's always doubt, there's uncertainty, and a lot of insecurity that gets part of that whole experience. So now that we've heard from the outsider perspective, for you, what were those emotions and experiences like as you're going through this, as this whole thing is getting built and those moments you mentioned where we probably should have thrown in the towel, but we didn't. What were your emotions like? What were the things that you were going through that were really difficult and how did you handle them?
Oof. You know, I think I would say in this chapter of life that I'm in now has probably been where I've felt the most feelings because I'm in that season of life where all my friends are married, they're all having babies. I have a number of friends that have started cool tech startup companies, and some have failed, some have flourished. And um, while I'm so proud of the work that we're doing at Action Africa, there is a bit of like, it's the same old, same old. Like I go back home for Christmas and everyone's like, oh, back from Africa. And I'm like, no, I live in Denver, but yes, I am still doing the Africa thing, like, so there is a bit of insecurity of like, do people perceive this as it's the same thing that I did when I was 15 years old? And my team does a great job of helping talk me off that ledge a little bit in reminding and educating people that this is more or less a much bigger deal than it was when I was 15 years old, and that there's a lot to be proud of. And if people still look at it as the cute high school club that Sarah started when she was 15, like that's on them and that's their loss. But that what we're doing is remarkable and is something I need to lean into. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that there are things that are easy to compare to being in this season of life that I have missed out on because I've made a choice to commit to my life up until this point in time to the work that we're doing in Uganda. Um, and I would imagine people probably look at my life too and compare it in certain ways and think parts of it are cool or they wish they were a part of it. I think that's just human nature. Um, so those are moments, and I've had to miss a lot of things. I'm missing a friend's wedding because I'm in Uganda next month and baby showers. And I feel like I'm having to make a lot of sacrifices to do the work that we do. Um, but I have a good job.
I think that's a very real answer. And I think I'm lucky that you shared that with me because there are. We really love to make everything look like unicorns and rainbows. And it is. There's this whole part of it that's so beautiful and so significant and important. But to diminish the fact that you're still human and you still experience real life emotions just because you have a really awesome, cool job. And might I say, really awesome that it started for you at 15 because not a lot of people can say that they've had any version of that kind of consistency in their life. I think that's a beautiful thing. So it's special and important that you were willing to share that because I do think it gets lost in translation a lot. And to sit here and be like, well, she has this massive company. She gets to go to Africa all the time and she loves what she's doing doesn't mean that there aren't parts that you also wish you could have. I mean, because also human nature is to want everything and to have accomplished everything that you thought you should accomplish by this point in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I have an obligation to lead from a place of showing that I'm human and that creates space and allows space for our team on the US side and our team in Uganda to do the same.
Yes, so I totally get it. I also totally relate. That's also part of this phase of our life. You get to a point where everybody gets married or you're like, wait, okay, I feel like I'm kind of getting left behind, but then you're also super successful in something else. And you're like, well, does that mean they get left behind there? Like, what's the trade-off here? And you have a lot of those real human moments where you just kind of look at your life, you're like, okay, well, I guess this was part of the plan.
Yeah. And I'm sure you can relate to this, but I think at this stage of life, life just goes so fast too. Like we have a lot of conversations around succession planning and how do we set the organization up for success outside of me and we keep talking about it, but I'm like, oh my gosh, we're still here. And I'm to blame for that, right? Because I'm energized and excited about our work and what we're doing and what more we could do that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be 85 years old here.
Yes. I appreciate you really sharing the personal side because I know it's hard. You come on here and you're talking about the professional side of your life and but personal plays such a significant role, especially on the nonprofit side. So thank you for sharing all
Yeah.
of that. Is there anything else in that capacity in the personal space where again, you were 15 when this all started and now you're in your 30s that you learned along the way that you wish you could pass on to younger you?
I could just remind myself. We have a saying, and this is, I'm embarrassed that I'm even sharing this with you, but as a family, but now also as a team, that everything works out for Sarah. And I have multiple feelings about that statement, but I will say, it's a good reminder that things do work out. And I'm a firm believer that what you put out into the universe, you also attract back to you. A word that I'm really leaning into this year is being magnetic and trying to create that type of magnetic energy. So I think as a teenager, and even honestly in the formative early years of Action in Africa, I just was so worried all the time. And that does not mean I'm not worried now or anxious about what the future holds or navigating this personal versus professional chapter of my life. But it all works out. And I'm just such a firm believer in that. And I think I can look back on what we've accomplished and what I've accomplished personally within the organization or outside it that is a testament to that. So I would remind myself to just like relax and not be so OCD about things and so manic and stressed, and just trust that like it's all going to work out.
So is that also a lesson that adult you is trying to learn, especially on the personal side of things as well?
I love that you're throwing that back at me because yes, I need to remind myself of that. And I do need to remember that because, and I love this, but also slightly terrifies me. I find that in chapters of my life, I always reflect back on wanting to be in previous chapters. And in doing that, you're missing out and being in the present. So trying to recognize that I'm sure at some point I will figure out my personal life. But once I do that, I do know that I will look back on this chapter that I'm in now being like, those were the glory days, like I wish I wasn't fixated on what's to come. So I think like a lesson in all this too is also just being really present. I try to ground myself in gratitude on a regular, consistent, multiple times a day practice because I think that also like really just sets the stage for how you show up and how things come into your life. But yeah, that's definitely something I should pay more attention to because it will all work out. I do believe that.
It's hard. One of the hardest lessons I think that I still am trying to learn every single day is being present for every single day versus living in the past or thinking to the future. Present living is not an easy accomplishment. It's one that's difficult for nearly every human on this planet. So I don't think you're alone in that. And I know just sitting here with me, you're not alone because I do the same thing. I can look back at so many, hindsight is always 2020. That's my favorite thing to remind
Mm,
myself of, especially when I'm
yeah.
in a moment where I'm contemplating or I feel out of control or I don't think I know what's going to happen next. I'm like, remember, every time you get past a moment, you're always like, well, hindsight was 2020. So try and have
Yeah.
your hindsight now.
Yeah.
So that's really special. Speaking of two, personally, what is it being a leadership role now, being in charge of 30 plus employees? You're the founder of this company, like you're an incredibly successful woman. What is that experience like for you? Because I know in a lot of the work that I've done, being a woman in these positions of success is not always the easiest thing.
Yeah, I have two answers for that because I think often about so a big part of my job now is our fundraising and making sure we have the resources to do the work we do. And I think regularly about if I was a male, if my approach and aggressiveness, for better or for worse, around fundraising would look differently and I'd be more successful. I think about that a lot because I think
Mm.
men show up a little bit more assertive and a little bit more confident and a little bit more bold with their ask. And by the way, maybe that's not the best approach, but I do think about that regularly. If I was a man, how I would show up in the fundraising space. But I think as a leader for our team, both on the US and on the Uganda side, I love being a female founder and a female leader. And I think I lean into being full of patience and grace, but also joy. And I've had to learn a lot about professionalizing my leadership, especially a number of our staff that I've known for 12 years, 10 years, when I was a kid, and my leadership then versus my leadership now as we professionalize as an organization has had to change a little bit. And how do I still keep that joyful, youthful Sarah self that showed up many years ago, but also, oh gosh, we're a multi-million-dollar organization and I probably should carry myself in a different way sometimes. Perfect example, like we used to do like midday office dance parties or like push up contests in the front office. And like now we can't do that because we have politicians that like show up or like parents who need to be taking our work seriously. So things like that, where I've just had to learn and grow a little bit, but also kind of navigating what my non-negotiables are as far as leadership and making sure I can still be joyful and make sure that people at work are doing a great job, but also enjoying the work that they're doing and having fun while at it.
I've always imagined being in a leadership role and being able to do things that you wish other people were doing. Like you look at other companies and you see leadership and you go, I don't feel like that's the right way of doing it. Have you gotten to have this cool experience where you get to implement a lot of things in the leadership role to make this company be something that you're proud of?
Ooh, love that. Yes, but I would say that's not isolated to me. I think it's been such a gift to grow this organization alongside the team that I have and it be a real collaborative, not so hierarchical of like, oh, I'm the founder, executive director, but that we're all kind of in this leadership responsibility together. So that has been such a gift and so fun. Um, Something I've been thinking about a lot lately is everyone has a perspective on how you should be doing things and like the self-help space and the leadership space and the coaching space. Um, it's just so noisy right now. And I find myself falling trapped to that. You know, like you come across a TikTok video that's like, here's the best way to lead a board meeting, or then like, here's the best way to show up and be a good boss. And you're like trying to aggressively take all these notes and apply it. And it's just too much. And I think even going back to like earlier parts of this conversation of just like trusting how you show up and how you lead, and like that sometimes being enough and not feeling so overwhelmed by the noise and constant improvement and adaptation to the world that we live in. Because it can be a lot to digest. But yeah, I
Yes.
would say like it's been fun to like build this and build my leadership style alongside the rest of our leadership team.
There's so much noise in social media in so many capacities, so I totally get it. You definitely have to kind of just find your approach that works for you and what you feel is best. And we're all human and learning along the way. So it's cool that you've gotten to experience and kind of form your own leadership style over the course of the entire organization. It's also a very unique experience. You know, you are on social media a lot and you see people do things. You're like, dang, I really have not had a unique life in any capacity, but you have. You have.
The noise would tell you otherwise, though,
This is
or that
true.
you're getting it all wrong.
This is. So, Action in Africa, where does it stand right now as an organization? How can people help or help you guys continue the work that you're doing? What does that look like?
Yeah, so as I loosely teased, we celebrated our 10-year anniversary in Uganda in January. So, celebrating our current community center and 10 years of impact, we feel like we've spent most of those last 10 years really refining our model and our work and paving a way forward to scale our impact and make sure that other communities can have access to the programs and services that we offer. So, we recently purchased 8.5 acres of land. We're building an additional campus over the next 3-ish years. To put it in perspective for you, our current campus serves about 500 kids a day, similar to like a YMCA or a Boys and Girls Club, a community center model. So after school programs, music, dance, drama, arts, access to food, medical, nutrition, public libraries, play, etc. And that's on half an acre. And so by buying 8.5 acres, it just helps you put in perspective the scale that's about to come. And the way this model will work is our new campus will be our headquarters, and then our current campus we will keep, and it's more or less our first satellite campus. So, creating this blueprint that is replicable and able to scale and impact multiple communities for years to come is our North Star and where we're headed. So, we're about to launch a massive capital campaign. So, wish me luck as a female fundraiser. But really looking forward to that and being able to take this model and grow it has been a big vision for us. We definitely have a philosophy of this inch wide but a mile deep, and we've spent years refining the work that we do, and now we feel confident and in a place to do that responsibly and ethically. So it's a very exciting chapter for us. I will tell you, we really struggled with the notion of scaling, and it took us 10 years to build our team and our model. And I think any good development work takes that level of time and patience. And unfortunately, it's not super sexy because people want to know how many schools can you build and how many kids can you feed overnight, and they don't want to see the long haul. But so for us, we were really worried about, so we built this campus, but who's going to run this? And now that our kids are graduating from university, from my humble founder's perspective, who better to hire than the accountants and the social workers and the teachers and the doctors and the lawyers that we've educated and have worked with and have built a loyalty to and with for the last 15 years. So it's a really exciting season. I'm like giddy about it and I just want to build it. So stay tuned.
I'm so excited for you guys because that does sound like a very exciting chapter and an all new one, right? This is an entirely new experience, even in the course of something that's for you been a part of your life for so long, but this is all new and new comes with a lot of fun things. So that sounds so exciting and you guys can check all that out. Just search up Action in Africa. But what I do like to end these episodes on is it can be a piece of advice, it can be motivation, inspiration, or touching on something that maybe we didn't even get to. I kind of give the floor over to you and you end us on something of your choosing.
Ooh. Um, I'd love to end just with a story if that's okay.
I would love that.
I think I think it just speaks to the work that we do and how we do it. So, when we moved into our community center 10 years ago, there was a beloved kid named Shaki, who I think at the time was about 3 years old, who lived across the street and has very severe cerebral palsy. And as I shared, my brother has cerebral palsy, but is very mobile at this point through extensive therapy and support. And in meeting Shaki, we built our special needs program and started to work with him and his family on an individual basis. And there was no hope for him to be independent and walking. And now, 10 years later, he is. And it gives me chills because it's a humble reminder of the investment that you can make in one human's life and how much of a difference you can make. And my dad always says, like, my dad came and has heard me talk about Shocky for years and saw Shocky walk down the hallway. And my dad, who's a large construction worker, wept and was like, if you did nothing ever again in your life and this is all that you did, it would all be worth it. And I think about that all the time from like my brother's perspective and my family's perspective, also for Shocky and his family. And then also the Action Africa staff who have worked so diligently to set this one kid up for success, to be independent and be healthy and to be successful. And we're about to do a video series on him. So keep an eye out for that. But now he's in school full time and wants to be a doctor in the future. And it's just so beyond inspiring. And that's one of thousands of stories that we have from the 18 years that we've been around. And who knows what the next 18 years will have in store. And I'm planning on being surprised about it, but I will tell you, yeah, if the only thing that ever happened was that Shocky ended up walking, I'll chalk it up as a big old win.
Oh, that's such a special story. And I don't think you could have chosen anything else better to end on. So we're not even gonna try. But Sarah, thank you for being here. Shout out where people can find you guys. That way, if they do want to see the series and just see what you guys are up to, they can.
Yeah, so the name of our organization is Action in Africa, and our website's actioninafrica.com. You can also find us on TikTok and Instagram and all the fun social platforms. Sign up for our newsletter. We often share ways that people can engage and participate. We do anything from trips to Uganda, so you can come and experience our work firsthand, to contributing to our special education fund, supporting kids like Shocky, or becoming a monthly donor, or coming to events that we do in Colorado, New York, LA. So that's where you can find us and what we're up to and how you can engage.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah, for being here and for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me, Morgan. It's fun to talk about. I'm so grateful for you to give us the space to share the work that we do. And I will separately share with you. I appreciate you asking about me as a human in this, because sometimes it's all just about Action Africa and the work that we do, and it should be, and that's the important stuff. But just female to female, I appreciate the inquiry on who I am as a person, irrelevant of this work.
Oh yeah, that's the whole part of the story. The volunteering and the nonprofit is special stuff, but people, humans, that has to start somewhere and that's always with them. So I'm glad, but thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Morgan, and come join us in Uganda one of these days.